What's the big deal about Christmas? I mean, we have these stories that even kids can retell of Jesus coming, of the shepherds, the wise men. But what's the big deal? Or what's the huge significance? Why should we keep celebrating when, in reality, year after year, I hear Christians saying, what do we do about Christmas this year? You ever said that or heard someone say that? I get where they're coming from. Christmas feels like it's been hijacked by the North Pole. It's been overrun by materialism. It's been wrapped up in tinsel and toys, and they're supposed to make us feel sentimental and jolly. It's the most wonderful time of the year, as the radio station so often reminds us. And I agree. I mean, we threw on a party last night, throwing up lights and celebrating Christmas together. But I get where people are coming from when they say, oh, what do we do about Christmas? Because it seems that the significance, the deep, life-changing impact of Jesus' coming to earth gets lost in all the celebration. Have you ever felt that? During the season of Advent, we are setting aside time to just focus on that deep impact and look at together the life-changing, history-changing impact that happened when Jesus came at Christmas. One of the reasons I was so excited for us to do a lighting celebration is because one of the most beautiful images of Christ's coming was given in Isaiah chapter 9. It says in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2, that people walking in darkness. Have you ever tried to walk in the dark? Maybe you had to go to the bathroom at night. Actually, last year, Mary and I, it was kind of our gift, or kind of like, for people that you want to just give like a funny gift, we got them this thing we saw on Shark Tank, and it's one of these, it's called the Luma Bowl. Have you seen this? You put it in your toilet bowl, and it's motion activated. And so when you walk in the bathroom, the toilet bowl, the whole thing lights up. It's amazing. And you can change the colors. You can have it like rotate the colors and all of that. And so we got one for ourselves. And so there's that moment, like our bedroom's just around the corner from the bathroom. And there's that moment, though, in the dark where you're walking and you're trying not to stub your toe and you're waiting for the Luma Bowl to come on. All right? Walking in the dark is not easy. And that's the image of Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2, is that people walking in darkness. So get that image in your mind. Walking in the darkness, you can't see what's in front of you. You can't see where you're going or where you're supposed to go. And they've seen a great light. Better than the Luma Bowl. On them a light has dawned. This is the image of Christmas. And I think as John begins his gospel in John chapter 1, that he's probably reflecting on Isaiah chapter 9 as he writes, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And in him was life, and that life was the light of all men." You see, the image of Christ's coming is light coming to a people who are blinded by darkness. Light is a picture of hope. Growing up in Maryland, we're proud about the Chesapeake Bay. It's a waterway that kind of cuts Maryland in half, and I had the privilege growing up to, my dad was an absolute waterman. He he loved the Chesapeake Bay. And we would spend many weeks of our summers boating on the bay. And actually, off the bay comes this little river called the Choptank River. And the best Maryland blue crabs that you'll get anywhere come from that Choptank River. So I learned to navigate waterways before I learned to navigate roadways. And I learned the lights. I learned the buoys. I learned to, riding on the water at night is in some ways a very terrifying thing because you can't see what's in front of you. You can't see, say there was a tree floating in the water. You can't see that. And so you rely heavily on lights. You rely heavily on charts of the waterways. But you're also like, you're looking out in the water. You're always looking ahead just a few feet. And sometimes you have radar that's looking for things in the water to see if there's anything ahead. And so there's a lot that goes into riding the waterways at night. And so my dad, from an early age, he taught me to read the lighthouses. To know, okay, so we'd have several routes we would go on, and I would know, okay, I go to this lighthouse number 2, and then I make about a 45-degree turn, and I go to lighthouse number 4. And one was white, one was green, one was red. They would tell me which side to go on, which side of the lighthouses to go on. But one of the hardest things about all of that was not the lighthouses, not the radar, not the looking at the water ahead of you, not the charts, but all of it all together. It was just a lot to manage. And you would be looking at the water in front of you, always making sure, and if you thought you saw something, you turn on the spotlight and you check, make sure there's nothing there. And you're looking at the chart, making sure you're staying in deep enough water. And all the while, I remember times where in the midst of all this, I'd look up and I couldn't find my lighthouse. I'd look out in the horizon and there's radio towers. There's lights just on shore from houses or whatever. And I can't figure out which one's the lighthouse. I think this is a good picture of what happens to us at Christmas so often. There's just a lot going on. We got a lot on our schedules, our families, the gifts we need to get, obligations. I mean, there's the expectations of the season. And in the midst of that, it's so easy to get caught up. But we're not trying to lose sight of anything. But we're just trying to manage everything at once. And what the season of Advent is it says we want to take our eyes off of the busyness of everything around us, and we want to realign with the light that has dawned in the horizon. There is a lighthouse. The coming of Jesus is in many ways a lighthouse for the church, for us to stake our course upon, to say the coming of Jesus, where God himself took on flesh. He came to be a light. And it says in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2, people walking in darkness have seen a great light. And what I want us to do over the next several weeks, and I hope that you can carve out time throughout your daily schedules, not just on Sunday, but carve out time to not only be silent, but also to realign, to look out on the horizon and see that light. And adjust your course. I remember one time I was just learning the waterways, and I was so focused on the water in front of me that I thought I was staying on course, but slowly, I was just a couple degrees off course, and I was drifting. I was heading toward kind of a rocky shoal that came out. And my dad would sometimes leave me at the helm and like go get a snack or something. And so he comes back, and it's this moment of alarm. Peter, where are you going? What are you doing? And I'm like, well, I was just watching the water, and the lighthouse is over there. For some of us, this season of Advent is a season of realigning. Saying, you know what? You've been trying to stay on course. You've been trying to follow Jesus. Maybe you've been reading the Word, or you've been coming to church. You've been trying to put into practice what we've been talking about being worshipers. But slowly, you're just focusing on what's ahead of you, and you've started to drift off course. People walking in darkness, a light has dawned. It's my hope that we can look into the horizon, look at the coming of Christ, and celebrate together. That light is the life of all men. And this morning, we celebrate together the reality that light, the picture of light in the darkness, is the picture of hope. Now hope is the confident expectation that a promise is true. Let me say that again. Hope is the confident expectation that a promise is true. And there in Isaiah chapter 9, we're given a promise. If you have your Bible, I invite you to open up to Isaiah chapter 9. Isaiah chapter 9. In verse 6. We're given a promise, and this is hundreds of years before Jesus is coming. The people of Israel are given a promise. It would be years before it really sank in that this is the promise of the Messiah, the one that would redeem their people from their sin. And this is what we read as Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given. It's a promise of someone who would come and be born, a child. And the government would be on his shoulders. He would be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Now, during this season of Advent, as we head into Christmas, one of the things that you can do in your own personal time that I guarantee will be deeply valuable for your soul in realigning with the light is to meditate, take some time, and look in the gospel narratives that tell of the birth of Christ. And here in Isaiah chapter 9, look at the names of Jesus that are given, even just in the birth narratives. Take Matthew chapter 1, Luke chapter 1 and 2. Look at the names that are given for Christ. Here in Isaiah, we're given this description, these names for Jesus: Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. It's a promise. It's a promise of someone who would come. And as we think this morning, what's the big deal about Christmas? Well, the big deal is hope. Jesus, the light that has dawned in the darkness, gives us hope. And we're going to explore more facets of this babe lying in a manger and how that really changes everything. But this morning, I'm going to give you 3 things of how hope is the big deal of Christmas. You see, as you think about Christmas, maybe as you talk with your family, as you talk with friends, or And maybe you have gatherings coming up, Christmas parties, and maybe there will be conversations where you talk about the big deal of Christmas. And you talk about what's significant about Christmas. Maybe it's talking about what you do as a family or whatever it is. Here's 3 things about hope, about the hope that Jesus brings, that I think you can tuck away in your heart and your mind as to why this is significant. Okay, so the first thing that Jesus does in him coming is he gives hope because Jesus reveals what we cannot see. This is part of the magnitude of the incarnation, as we call it, where God became a man, is Jesus reveals what we cannot see, in that Jesus gives us a picture of who God is. And we see that in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7 here. It says, verse 6, it says, He is wonderful counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father. So we see that Jesus is God himself. And like I said, I think John, as he writes his gospel, was reading this passage when he starts it out, because he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God. And then John goes on to say, the Word, who is God, took on flesh. And we have seen his glory. You see, this is the hope of Christmas. This is how Jesus changes everything, is that Jesus reveals what we cannot see. It's because it is in Jesus that we have the fullest picture of who God is. So the first thing is that we have hope because Jesus reveals what we cannot see. Secondly, we have hope because Jesus is who we cannot be. Jesus is who we cannot be. And this is what we believe about Christmas, is that Jesus came to live a perfect, sinless life. Something that none of us could do. And Jesus, who is fully God, fully man, is able to do what we cannot do. He lives a perfect, sinless life. He dies at the cross to pay the debt that we owed because of our sin. And here at Christmas, we celebrate the baby lying in the manger is the one that we cannot be. And that gives us hope. Because no matter how hard we try, we can't live up to a perfect life. Christmas is a time of year where people want to feel good about doing good. You notice that? People want to feel good about doing something good. What we celebrate at Christmas is that we can't be good. What we celebrate is that Jesus is the only one who is good. We celebrate, we have hope because Jesus is who we cannot be. So we have hope because Jesus reveals what we cannot see. We have hope because Jesus is who we cannot be. And finally, we have hope because Jesus can change what we cannot change. And this, my friends, is why I think the season of Christmas is so meaningful this year, is because as I look at our world today, especially this past year, I see darkness. I see people walking in darkness. I see brokenness. From shootings to devastation to injustice. And we long, as a church, we long, as humanity, we long for peace on earth. And what we believe, and what Isaiah chapter 9 gives us the promise of, is that Jesus can change what we cannot change. Sure, you can put your hope in a new president, you can put your hope in a new administration and a new legislation, but ultimately, Jesus can only change what we cannot change. It says in verse 7, of the greatness of his government and peace, there will be no end. This is the hope of Christmas, guys. That Jesus came, and not just that Jesus is coming again. And that he has promised when he does, he's going to establish peace. He's going to establish justice. He's going to change what we cannot change. I think it's true. It's one of the most wonderful times of the year, Christmas. But it's not because of the tinsel or the toys, but it's because there's a light in the horizon. A light that gives life to all men. And it's a light that reveals the God, the Father, who we cannot see, but Jesus gives us a picture of. And that light in the horizon is the one who is able to live in a perfect, sinless life and pay the debt that we owed because of our sin. And that is hope. That is the light in the horizon. And we have hope because that light in the horizon is a promise. Is a promise that Jesus can change what we cannot change. He can change in your family what you cannot change. He can change in your heart that sin that you can't seem to kick out of your life. He can change it, and the light has dawned in the horizon. And I encourage you to take your eyes off the water, take your eyes off of the things around you, and look at the light in the horizon. And let the hope of Christmas be alive in you. I believe Christmas is a big deal because Jesus, the Word made flesh, the light that has dawned in the horizon, he gives us hope.